Alright everybody, so it's been about 100 hours, roughly 4 days since I've had the iPhone 15 Pro Max in that natural titanium colorway, and I wanted to give you guys my first impressions, my overall thoughts, how I've been using it, what are the ins and outs and nuances that I've noticed. This isn't a full review, we'll get to that in a little bit, but this is my first impressions and to give you guys an idea of what to expect if you're waiting for a pre-ordered iPhone or thinking about getting one. Let's get into it. Now the first thing I want to do is start off with the design and the feel of this new iPhone. And to give you guys some context, I am coming from an iPhone 13 Pro Max, so I didn't have the 14 Pro Max. I'm not used to the dynamic island quite fully, but from a form factor standpoint, the 13 Pro Max and 14 Pro Max were relatively the same. But the first thing I did notice when picking up the iPhone 15 Pro Max is just the lightweight nature of the device itself. So it just felt a little bit smaller, it felt a little bit more easy to wield in the hand, if that's even kind of what you want to describe it as, because it is made of titanium, and Apple did say it's about 10% lighter than the 14 Pro Max, and that same thing occurs with the 13 Pro Max in comparison. So when you do grab it and you are used to those bigger phones, you do notice that this is a little bit lighter in the hand, and when you hold them side by side, you really do notice. Now, you might say 10% difference in a 300 gram or 250 gram phone isn't that big of a deal, but when you're using something every single day and holding it with the same hand for 8 to 10 hours a day, you do notice a difference. And then the next thing that you notice immediately is the feel in the hand. Now, I wasn't somebody that complained when people were saying that the edges were too sharp on the iPhone 12, 13, and 14. I like that industrial design, but I do get it. I did notice that, hey, it is a very squared off design, and because it is made out of that stainless steel material, it kind of cuts into whatever finger you're holding it with to kind of keep it in place. Now, again, I wasn't somebody that was openly complaining about it, and I didn't really notice it too much, especially when you use a case. But when you use this phone, this 15 Pro Max without a case, you notice two things immediately. First thing is those curved edges. Visually, it doesn't look super different compared to last year's model, but it feels completely different. Maybe not as rounded off as the 11 and the 11 Pro Max from 4 years ago now at this point, but it does make it feel a lot more comfortable in the hand. And then that same kind of curved edge makes it feel even smaller in the hand, and the thinner bezels compared to last year's model, it actually shrinks the Pro Max just a tiny bit. They decided to shrink the actual chassis as opposed to actually just making the screen a tiny bit bigger, which I like because this does make it feel like a one-handed phone to an extent. There are some buttons maybe at the very end where I kind of stretch my thumb to reach over to it, but it feels a little bit easier to hold on to and a little bit easier to navigate as a single-handed phone, which is something I couldn't really say about the 13 Pro Max. So if you're coming from any of these phones, that's the first thing you're going to notice, and it is a nice kind of change up. It does make it easier to use. It makes you feel like it's a little bit easier to hold on to in the hand. It makes you want to use it without a case especially, so definitely be careful, but also watch the video that we probably already released on the best iPhone 15 cases that are already out. And from a color standpoint, I went with the natural titanium. Depending on when the light hits it, it kind of changes into different colors. You kind of get like a goldish hue. Sometimes it looks a little bit more silver. Overall, I think it's an outstanding color. I love the color of it. I've been preferring to use either a clear case or no case at all just to show off the color, at least for the first week or two as I'm using it and kind of testing it out. But from a color standpoint, I guess that's obviously fully up to you and what your opinion is and what your preferences are, but I really like this natural titanium look, and it's just a little bit different. And then also with that side railing, we're coming from the stainless steel, which was an absolute fingerprint magnet. That thing was basically a mirror. Versus this one, I have seen a lot of people saying that it does get a little bit fingerprinty, especially with the blue colorway, but I haven't really noticed any fingerprints whatsoever, and it's nothing that a quick swipe on the sweater can't fix. But again, when you are holding it in your hand and you do kind of press a bunch of buttons and you're messing with it a lot, the fingerprints, you do see like maybe a tiny bit of smudging, but it's 99% less than what it was with the stainless steel. So now that's the design, and yes, it is a big deal, even though it isn't visually that different, and for most people, if they see a 15 Pro Max compared to a 13 Pro Max from the rear, they might not notice a big difference, but if you're somebody that uses it on a daily basis and you've kind of come from those older iPhones, you're going to feel it and you're going to notice it. But now I kind of want to talk about how I've been using the iPhone. Again, this isn't a full review. We're going to do that probably in a week or so once we get our hands really into every single little feature and setting and nuance. But some of the things that I do want to bring up and kind of walk you through how I've been using it day to day is, first is the action button. The action button is actually something that is a lot more useful than we really thought in the beginning. Obviously, when you go into your settings, go into the action button settings, there is that nice little animation or that new kind of UI, which lets you decide some predetermined applications that Apple has set forth that you can choose from, right? You have things like the setting focus modes, going to the camera, the flashlight, and then obviously you can use the shortcuts. So shortcuts is kind of what makes this action button just this new way of interacting with your iPhone. You can keep it really simple and just do a random shortcut like turning on a flashlight, like turning on your smart light or maybe changing the temperature. Or for me, I have it opening the Twitter application when I press on the actual action button. But I've seen people go crazy with it, creating action button menus inside of shortcuts. Like Steven Robles made a great video on his personal channel, which I'll link down below, kind of showing you how to actually create a shortcuts menu when holding down the action button. So you can have, 8 to 12 different options, or you can have all of those action button options with just one single action button, which I think is awesome. And again, the sky's the limit with this thing. If you can put it into your shortcuts application, you will be able to run it in the shortcuts ecosystem, and kind of the shortcuts kind of community is very, very robust. So don't be surprised if you're thinking about a shortcut, somebody's definitely already made it, and you can just probably look it up to figure it out. So if you're in the shortcuts ecosystem and community and you use this action button, it's kind of an infinite canvas when it comes to the action button, which is something that I didn't think I would really, enjoy or see the value in too much until, we finally got it in our hands. And then with everyday use, again, we're on iOS 17.0.1, I believe it is now at this point. So Apple definitely put some bug fixes in there to try to make it a little bit more of a smoother transition. But this is not a review of iOS 17, but it's very snappy, right? It's Apple's A17 Pro, it's the latest and greatest, the 3nm chip. I've had zero issues, no freeze ups. I've been able to go in between applications very easily without any hiccups. I've been able to play games, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But overall, the A17 Pro chip alongside iOS 17 has been very, very fluid and very easy to use. I've had zero issues, and again, you shouldn't have any coming to this brand new iPhone. But one thing I have been seeing on Twitter a lot is that people are complaining that the iPhone 15 Pro Max in particular is getting warm to the touch. Now, maybe I'm just not pushing it to its, 1/1000th degree by recording in ProRes and RAW and, log footage, which is stuff that I don't do on a daily basis. But the only time it got warm for me, and it was only a tiny bit warm, was when I was transferring everything from iCloud. So I was restoring this as a new device. So it was downloading hundreds of applications in the background while I was also playing with it. So at that point, yes, it got a little bit warm to the touch. But outside of that, it's been cool to the touch. Again, I'm not using a case with it right now, and nothing is really happening. I've gamed with it. I've watched 4K video with it. I've done pretty much what most people are going to do, but I haven't really gone and tested the ProRes footage and recording. But I've recorded up to an hour-long shot on 4K, and the phone is totally fine. So I think the heating up situation is a case-by-case basis. It depends on what you use your iPhone for. If you're pushing it to an extreme for hours on end, yeah, it's probably going to get a little bit warm to the touch, because think about it. You got literally a game console, a content consumption machine, a phone, a web browser, or a music player. You can literally do, this is a computer in the palm of your hand made out of titanium. So yes, it could get a little bit warm to the touch, especially because it's Apple's brand new 3nm process. So they're doing a lot of stuff in a small, even smaller form factor and small package. So it could get warm, but for me, it's been perfectly fine. And now the next big change was the USB-C port. Now this thing has opened up a lot of stuff for me personally, and I've already tested it in a bunch of different fashions. So firstly, that USB-C port acts exactly like you want it to, right? You can easily transfer data much, much faster with a different cable, not the cable that's included in the box itself. But if you have a USB-C 3.2 Gen 2 port, this thing will be able to push up to 10 gigs of data transfer speeds out of your iPhone and into an iPad, for instance, which is what I've been doing. I'll take these A-roll shots or these B-roll shots and plug it directly into my iPad, and all of a sudden I'm cooking with fire, and I'm able to not rely on AirDrop anymore for these larger video files, which is absolutely amazing. So for me, the USB-C edition has been great, but then I've also tested a few other things, like what's to stop you from this being your main game console? Games like 2K are already on Apple Arcade, they work extremely well. You can connect a Bluetooth controller to this thing, and you can see that when I plug the USB-C cable in with an HDMI dongle out, you can literally play video games on any screen that you want. So I can connect it to my 32-inch BenQ monitor behind me. I have a 100-inch TV downstairs that I can play NBA 2K on with my iPhone. So again, the sky's the limit with this USB-C port. All the USB-C accessories and dongles that worked on your iPad or worked with your MacBook Pro or whatever the case may be now work with your iPhone. So you can connect keyboards, you can connect the mouse, you can connect external drives, you can connect SSDs, you can connect whatever you want, right? Any dongle, and it's gonna work with your iPhone. And then the last thing I do want to touch on as a first impressions is the camera sensors, right? Because Apple did add that 5x telephoto lens, and it's great. Like if you're somebody that takes 5x shots at a decent clip, so you need the ability to zoom in and keep good photo quality and not just kind of rely on digital zoom, this is great. Like I went to a football game this weekend, we were sitting relatively close, but I was still able to zoom in and get some great pictures of some of the players on the football field, even though I was still, at least 100 feet away, maybe even further away. So having the 5x optical zoom and having a real 5x zoom camera is going to be great for a lot of photographers. Again, I'm not somebody that uses it too often. I'm not a bird watcher. I'm not really zooming in to do much, but it's nice to have. It's like it's not a necessary upgrade, but it is very nice to have. And it's amazing how Apple's able to do it with a periscope lens without having to kind of make the camera bump even bigger. So again, to each their own, the 5x telephoto is a great addition. but it's not something that I would really run. Like the 3x telephoto on the 13 and 14 Pro Max were great also. 5x is just a better version of that can zoom in a little bit further. Again, the camera modules on the iPhone 15 Pro Max are great. Yes, maybe they're a little bit better than the 14 Pro Max, but it's not worth running home to, right? So if you had a 14 Pro Max, the only reasons I would upgrade are if you really want the titanium finish and you want that new form factor or the new-ish form factor, and then USB-C. If you're somebody that is constantly moving photos and data from your iPhone and you're relying on something like AirDrop or maybe some sort of Lightning to USB dongle, having USB-C and the ability to have those USB 3.2 Gen 2 speeds is a game changer for those people like myself that are dealing with big files on their iPhone. And like I said, the sky's the limit for that USB-C port and that action button, because you can do whatever you want pretty much with the action button since Apple let us use shortcuts. And then with USB-C, I can see Amazon and third-party, manufacturers making some crazy cases, right? Obviously, I'm thinking battery cases and things like that, but I'm also thinking SSD cases, right? Or maybe a case that has like 5 or 6 different ports. So you have an HDMI port and you have an auxiliary port and things like that. So I think there's going to be a lot of manufacturers making some crazy USB-C accessories for the iPhones. And let's not forget that the regular iPhone 15s also got USB-C. It's just not the fast version of USB-C, which, to each their own. But that is going to do it for this video, everybody. Like I said, I wanted to give you guys my first impressions, my 100-hour review of the iPhone 15 Pro Max. I love that I went with the natural titanium. I feel like I'm not missing out with that blue colorway or the other ones that Apple kind of brought out. And the USB-C and action button are a very welcome surprise, especially that action button. If you're somebody that loves automation, loves their shortcuts, the action button is a great little additive. Now, I did see that somebody on Twitter said, what's to stop somebody from using that double tap on the rear feature? Which is true. You could use accessibility and use a double and triple tap on the rear of the iPhone to kind of give you some of the same functionality as the action button, but from my testing, that double tap feature is probably like 70% reliable because, the gyroscope needs to be working perfectly and it kind of just depends on how you hit it, versus the action button, is 100% reliable. So that's just my 2 cents on that situation as well. But battery life for me has been amazing so far. It better be, because I just spent $1,200 on a phone that's only 3 days old. But the battery life has been amazing. I'll put a screenshot of what I've been doing from a battery life perspective right here. So from a heating standpoint, I think it's kind of on a case-by-case basis that Apple with software updates will fix eventually. But leave a comment down below. Are you somebody that pre-ordered the iPhone? What is your thoughts on the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max or the whole 15 lineup? Are you kind of on the fence? Like I said, if you're already on the 14 Pro Max, it's going to be tough to recommend, but I wouldn't be surprised that people would upgrade from the 14 Pro to the 15 Pro just for the camera, the action button, the design, and USB-C. But if you're on the 13 or below, this thing is a no-brainer if you are looking to upgrade. But that's going to do it. Like I said, everybody, stay tuned for our full-length review on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, as well as the rest of the iPhone 15 lineup. And we got some good camera comparisons coming as well, so definitely stay subscribed. But if you guys want to watch some more iOS, iPadOS, or macOS videos, click on one of these right here. And until next time, I'm Fernando. I'm out of here, everybody. Peace.